Okay, I guess it reconnected me back to my last live. Oh, you know what? I don't know what happened, but it looks like my live ended. So I'm going to start this live over. If you are a HTU student, I will make sure that I get you guys this link to this new video because I literally had to set up a whole new link for this particular class week 2 because for whatever reason it knocked me off. Okay, YouTube knocked me off. I'm not sure what happened there, but they knocked me off. So, because I know that I'm not talking to anyone, I'm going to go ahead and go over last week's notes or last week's course notes, right? So, last week, this was which was week 1, was your introduction into life lessons with specialization and self actualization and resiliency. And during that particular week of week 1, we talked about the mirror moment. That was the thing that we went into understanding who you are and define self actualization in your own terms. And if you look at the notes that were provided last week or in your PDF or when you go to your workbook, there's it highlighted exactly what we were speaking about in terms of the mirror moment or how you define self actualization. And although we know it as being Maslow's one of his hierarchy of needs, for you, you have to get an understanding of what does it look like to you to be self-actualized. Is that one of those things where you are in a position where these things are taken care of to what you desire, right? Because everybody's level of comfortability looks different, right? Everybody's level of comfortability looks different. Some people, and I'm not going to go into what looks different, but like you have like movie stars, right? You have people like myself who are regular citizens, right? What is called it, middle class or something like that. They wouldn't be okay in my lifestyle because why? Their lifestyle, listen, for them to pay their the people that help them in their home to help manage their home is probably what I make it a month just doing that alone. That's before they get into the doing the other things. By the time they pay for butlers and chauffeurs and nannies and babysitters and people like that, I'm sure they're spending a lot of money. So for them to be able to self actualize, it looks different for them than it would for me because I'm at the point where okay, these things are comfortable for me. I'm at the place in time. Now, do we always want something more? Absolutely, right? But for the most part, my basic needs are met. I feel safe in my home. I have a home to put over my head, or excuse me, I have a roof to put over my head. I have food in the refrigerator, right? I feel like I said, I feel safe. Like all those things feel good to me, right? I feel love. I have a community. I have family, right? All those things are at a level where they work for me. So for me to get to self actualization stage, right, which is that final stage of your needs of hierarchy, it's one of those things where it literally looks different for everyone, and it depends on again how you view it and how someone else views it. In other words, what's your level of comfortability as comparable to somebody else's level of comfortability, right? It just depends, right? And so when it comes to looking at self actualization in terms of what does it look like for you, only you define that, right? You define what that looks like for you, right? And so that's what I want to talk about. So in that, I hope that you guys were able to really dive deep into that first lesson of doing the homework, and that was just defining to you, right? Now, this week 2, this week we are breaking into we are talking about breaking free of autopilot living, right? And this is simply survival isn't the goal. Just surviving isn't the goal. There are a lot of things that we do as people, and there's an old saying, sometimes we get along to get along, right? And so when you think about why do you do the things that you do, are these things that are innately because of where you come from, things that you heard? Like, for example, the church that you attend. Why do you attend that church, right? Why do you practice that particular religion? This isn't to say that you should question anything. Is this something you want to do, or if this is something that was instilled in you? Not only that, but what does your happily ever after look like? Does it look like the Hollywood, right? Does it look like Hollywood? And here's where I want to insert an example of happily ever after, because I think that when we talk about this forever, this happily ever after, when I coach people, one of the things that I ask them about is what does it look like for them? What does their happily ever after look like? Many of them will say that Hollywood version, which is it looks like a picket white fence, a house, picket white fence, two and a half children with a dog, right? And then a spouse, right? They're working the American dream. They're able to go on vacations, right? Things like that. They talk, it's like a Hollywood dream, right? And this isn't to say that you shouldn't get those things. However, is this something that you adopted as what your happily forever after look like? Is it something that was passed on to you from maybe your parents or from other people in your family to say, you know what, this is what it looks like to me? But something I want to remind you of when we talk about Hollywood stories or Hollywood, lives, we want our lives to look like Hollywood. In order to make a motion picture a box office hit, it takes hundreds of people for that thing to become a success, right? You ever stay long enough on a movie and you see all the credits coming down, right? You have the executive producers, you have the producers, you have the extras, you have the actors, the actresses, you have the people that cook the food, you got the people that rent the trailers, you got the makeup artists, you got the prompt, you got the lighting. I mean, you have so many people on a set of a movie. Now, that's when the movie is being made. What about when it's time to produce the movie, or should I say, come up with the idea of the movie before it even goes to production, right? There are several people that come to, like, in my mind, they come to like a round table, right? You have, different people that come to a round table. They come together about a movie idea. Well, I have this idea about a movie about this. So once they do that idea, I have a movie about this idea. From there, pieces and pieces are picked up from other people around that same table where they say, you know what, that's a good idea. Why don't you make this person do this? You know what? Matter of fact, maybe it should be a superhero. Maybe they should be this. So it takes a lot of people to come up with the concept of a movie long before it even gets to productions, right? And then once it gets to productions, and take a lot more people, different people with different job titles and different backgrounds and different experiences to come in and do their part in order for that movie to go into the studio, in order for it to be produced and for it to become a box office movie, let alone a box office hit. And not all movies are hits, right? So when you talk about your life, and why do I use this analogy? Because when you talk about your life, it's one of those things like you can't expect your life to look like that, because there are hundreds of brains that come together of people that have different experiences, different ideas, different all kind of things, right? So clearly when it comes about our lives, why do we feel like our lives should look like this? And if it does look like that, then how do you get it to where it looks like your version of that, not Hollywood's version of it, but your version of it? Okay. And so this is what breaking free from that autopilot living, right? Are you doing things because we recognize our behaviors? And I'm going to read this straight off my notes. The objective here for this particular week 2, is that we recognize behaviors, beliefs, and emotional patterns rooted in survival mode and begin making intentional shifts towards aligned conscious living, right? In other words, you start doing things because you think that this is the way it's supposed to go, right? And a lot of it are things that we pass down from generation to generation. And unfortunately and fortunately, some things are rooted in trauma. Some of the things that we pass down from generations and generations are rooted in trauma, right? There's no explanation. You ever heard your parents say, because I said so, right? It wasn't one of those things that they would tell you, well, don't do this for this reason. A lot of times it was because I said so. Because a lot of times they didn't even know why they were saying it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And then sometimes they just didn't have the time to tell us, but that's a whole nother story. They didn't have the time to sit down and explain it to us. But then there were times where they themselves didn't know the answer to why we do certain things a certain way, right? Because we are in the process of routine. You ever drive yourself to your job, right? Drive yourself to your job and you don't even remember how you got there. Like you cannot even remember taking turn for turn. It's almost like, you know what? I must have, because I arrived here. But you do that on autopilot. For you to get in your job, if you live at, especially if you've been at your job for a while and you've lived at the same place for a while, you get in your car and you go the same route. Only time you might change the route is if there's something that's obstructing your traffic, like a accident or something like that. But for the most part, you're going to take that same route. You're going to get to work, right? And so it's just one of those things where that's auto living. That's autopilot living. We're not even really conscious of what we're doing because it's like Groundhog Day every day. It's like Groundhog Day every day. That's kind of what an idea of what autopilot living is, right? And so when we think about autopilot living in terms of survival mode, the things that we think about survival mode is that when it comes to the mind and the body's response to it, we would perceive certain things as being dangerous, right? Because we get into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn thing, right? So for example, and this is what I mean by the whole survival mode. We get into survival mode about what do I do? Is it time for me to fight? Is it time for me to freeze? Or is it time for me to fawn, right? And this is something that I always ask people the question about. Like if you're in a situation, you guys ever see movies where the bad guy is chasing a group of people, and then you'll have that one person that just freezes up. They don't know what to do, they just freeze, right? That is the freezing aspect of it, right? Then you might have that same scenario where the first person, the person who is the bad person is chasing them, they'll run. That's a flight response. Okay. Now then you might have that person where they may say, well, okay, I'm just gonna fight my way out of this. That's your fight response because they're like, okay, I can't be fast enough, right? I know I got to do something, so I'm just gonna fight my way out of it. But then the fawn portion is the person that tries to sit there and say, well, you know what? I know you want this or I know you want that. It's like they're people pleasing. They're trying to negotiate their way out of things, right? In their mind, they feel that I guess their personality can get them out of things, right? And here's the thing. I'm not saying that one of those responds are any more vital to you as a person than anyone, right? Because in my opinion, and as someone who teaches life skills and someone who was raised in Detroit, Michigan and served in the military for 25 years, I believe that all these responses are things that you need to have. Like you need to know when to run. You need to know when to doggone like freeze. Like if there's something going on and like going on over there, like you might not be able to run. You might have to just be able to just back up, right? Or duck low, right? That's like a freeze response, right? Because if you run that way, you're going to go into danger. If you go that way, you're going to go into danger. So sometimes you have to stay here, right? So you got to know when to do these things. You got to know when to fight. You got to know when to flee, when to run, when to freeze, whatever, when to fawn. You have to know all these things, but also recognize that whatever actions that you take sometimes are a lot of times your trauma response because we are on autopilot, right? If we are on autopilot and we do things and we just do it that way, a lot of times that's our trauma response. We don't know how to behave or how to react in certain situations because it's out of our normal routine. It's out of our daily life, right? So because something is out of our daily life, sometimes it feels foreign. And because it's foreign to us, we don't know how to respond. Okay. And so when you're talking about life skills and self-actualization and things like that, we have to know when are we fighting? When are we freezing? When are we fleeting? What is it? Flighting. And then when are we fawning? Right. We have to know when are we doing these things and why. It just can't be because I told you so. You have to really know why you're doing it. Right. And so some of the examples when we talk about autopilot living is simply put like things like this. It says autopilot living means going through the motion, avoiding hard conversations, operating off of outdated habits, confusing business with purpose. In other words, another way that I want to describe autopilot living, and I think that's very, very in certain communities, in certain environments, I think it's one of those things where it definitely needs to be addressed. Working hard or looking to work hard in order to look like you're moving in society. In other words, if I have 2 and 3 jobs, because see, having 2 and 3 jobs sometimes is a trauma response, right? So having 2 or 3 jobs because now I'm just trying to survive. because we're on autopilot. So I got to have 2 or 3 jobs. And some people look at that as, if you're not working these type of jobs, then you don't want it hard enough, because part of getting it, you should have to struggle, right? That's a trauma response. That's a trauma response. Thinking that in order to be successful or in order to work hard, you have to have 2 jobs, your calendar have to be full. You don't have time for weekends, you don't have time for vacations, you don't have time for anything. It's almost like, you're hustling hard. You're hustling hard. We all know where hustling hard got us, right? We've seen our grandparents and our ancestors and those who have health issues, and how they push and they push and they push, and they did not take care of themselves, right? We've seen the medical bills. We've seen them having to have high blood pressure medication. We've seen them having to be on dialysis, or having to have different joints replaced in their bones or whatever, because they weren't taking care of themselves. Why? Because they could not afford to take off work, right? Because if you lay back, you just wait. No, at some point we do have to, we have to always, I'm not going to say at some point, we have to always take care of our body. And we have to recognize that a lot of what we do is coming from a place of trauma, a place of auto living and surviving, as opposed to just, instead of you living for a purpose, you're just living. It's like checking the block. Okay, I went to work, check. I raised a family, check. I did this, check. And that's it. Because it's like check, 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 right? And then you stay in that box. Okay. Is that something that we want to continue doing or do? Because what I know about that box is that box will keep you in a box. It will keep you in your 4 corners of the world, because you are now afraid because of trauma, right? Because you don't know how to respond in certain situations, right? It will keep you there. So you have to ask yourself, are you living in an autopilot life, or are you taking your life and saying, I'm going to make it what I want it to be? It's going to look the way I don't want it to be, this way, right? We saw our parents, be come home from work, and it's like just a rinse and wash. I mean, was it wash and rinse, or a rinse and wash? It's like do the same thing over again, Groundhog Day. Is that something that you want your life to look like? And if you don't want your life to look like that, then what are we doing to make sure that it don't? Right? And so some of the reflections for this week, okay? Where in your life are you just existing instead of choosing? Right? Where are you just existing? Are you, just like I said a minute ago, are you coming home from work and you just, okay, check, I went to my 9 to 5, check. You might go to the gym 3 days a week, okay, check. You might every now and then take your spouse out for a date or hang out with your children, check. You pay your bills on time, check. And that's it. You're just doing this right here. You wait. What are you waiting for? Because there's no promotion at your job in sight, or you're not working towards anything more, right? You're taking every day just as it is. Like, you're not, like, what are you doing to make yourself get towards those goals? Like, what is that agreement you made in the very beginning? Okay. Sometimes we can get caught up in everyday life that we forget about things. We forget to do certain things. Why? Because life is lifing, like they say. Life is lifing. And I get it. I get it. Trust me, I know life is lifing. Okay, but what happens if you just take that 30 minutes a day, or that 30 minutes a week, or that 30 minutes bi-weekly, to rewrite or to write your goals out, and then go back and see, what am I doing to prepare myself for this thing? If I said, for example, one of the things that I said to someone the other day is that they told me that they were interested in buying a truck, what is it, a Sprinter van, right? They explained to me that they were interested in buying a Sprinter van. And so the only thing I know about a Sprinter van is when I watch the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Okay. When I watch the Real Housewives, or any of the wives, as a matter of fact, but I only watch 1 or 2 of them, they have a Sprinter van. And a Sprinter van is the one where it picks them up from location to location, and they're able to go out, and they have a driver, and all of them are in vans, and they have cameras set up. And so it's like you can see what they're doing in the Sprinter van. So that's all I knew about a Sprinter van. So when this person told me they were interested in starting a Sprinter van business, my first thought process was just the housewives, right? Wait a second. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Once I talked to them a little bit about that, right, I went ahead and went into online, and then I Googled into Chat GPT, like a business plan for a Sprinter van. And so I gave this particular thing out because the person, I knew they didn't have Chat GPT. So I printed out this, or I say I took everything, and I sent a copy over to them. It was just a basic business plan. Next Chat GPT is give me a business plan, one way that you can use a Sprinter van so that it is beneficial and it will maximize its potential, right? A Sprinter van has the potential to make up to $20,000 a month, right? Then it was telling me about how much a new one would cost and what you can do with it. I mean, it gave me a lot of options that you can do, right? That potentially you can, if this truck is on the road or being used 30 days a month or 28 days a month, it has the potential to make about $20,000 a month before you pay the bill. So, that's not profit. That's just after you get done paying your driver or whatever. But as an owner, you could probably make half of that on a monthly basis. Now, once I gave this paper to this person, they was appreciative of it. But then something that they said to me was, you know what, this plan that you got for me did one of two things. And the second thing that they said was it made me realize how far I was from doing this thing. And so for me, I didn't quite understand it because in my mind, if you say that this is what you want to do, and you're saying, I'm trying to buy this for this reason, or I'm trying to buy this for this business, my first thought process is that you're going to go and do some research. You're going to do, like, you're going to see how can I do this thing. But they said they hadn't done anything. And so that's when, of course, I started to ask more questions about, what they plan to do with it. And so it was definitely not in line with what I had saw it to be, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. And so that's how I see the whole concept of, are we existing or are we living? Like, if you say that you want to do something, are you setting yourself up in order to go and do those things? If you say that in 2 years from now you want to tour France, say you want to tour France, you want to go to Paris, you want to go to France, and you just want to just tour for 30 days. And that's something that I would want to do, and I want to just live in that country for 30 days, I'm going to go and try to learn some basic skills in French, right? It's not saying that I got to learn how to speak the whole language, but I got to know how to say the basic greetings, right? Because this is on my vision board, right? I don't know if I can afford to be in France for 30 days or whatever for this long and just be a nomad out there living, be hotel hopping or Airbnb hopping. I don't know if I can do that. However, because this is something that I foresee myself doing, how do I prepare for it? Right? If I want to do it 3 years from now, right, or 5 years from now, one of the things that I can do, because it's on my vision board, I don't know how much it's going to cost. Maybe I can start saving. Maybe I can start coming up with what does that look like. And this is the same concept that we should use, or I challenge you to use in your everyday life. So even if you are living life and you look at yourself and you say, you know what, I have to check the block on work today. I have to check the block on doing this. I have to check the block, and you feel this way. I challenge you. One way that you can kind of break that is get yourself a journal and start journaling and put your goals down there. And your goals can change. They can change. Listen, at one point, I remember when I said I was okay with having $100,000 in the bank. I was okay with, as long as I had $100,000 in the bank in my savings, I was good. Until I realized that that's the minimum of six figures, and it goes quick. Then I had to rethink that thing. Okay, when I was young, I was like, okay, I got to rethink things because $100,000 is not what it used to be when I was a kid. When I thought making six figures was what you needed. It don't. No, 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 no. Not the when you got it. When you say six figures, you got to be specific. Give me the 999, comma 999.99. Okay, that's the kind of six figures I need, right? And so what I'm saying to you is, and I got off on a tangent there, but when I say about living, these are the things that I'm talking about. What are you doing to work yourself up to those things? Because like I said, your goals can change, right? So if you have a goal that this is what you want to do now and it changes, it becomes more, listen, if sometimes we can't dream big enough. You got to dream big, right? You got to dream big. Dreaming big is what gets you to that goal. You can't just dream small and say, okay, I just want to do. No, dream big. Dream big, right? And that's part of self actualizing. That's part of self actualizing. Okay. So for this week's assignment, Okay, so for this week's assignment, let me find my sheet for this week's assignment. All right, the homework prompt. Track your thoughts, habits, and emotional responses. Where are you living on autopilot? This is where you go and you say, okay, what do I do every day that's just like on autopilot? What can I do differently? And I'm not saying change your whole structure, but what I do know is that when we do the same thing over and over again, it becomes mundane. And that life starts to play with us. Let me say this real quick. One thing that I noticed about myself as a veteran, but not only that, but as a child, that my mother was on welfare as a child. So because of that, a lot of times we had to change houses every year or every second year, because if they went up too much on the rent, right, in the beginning, then my mom couldn't afford it. Now, once I got a little older, she started working and then things were different or whatever, but in the very beginning. And so now that I'm an adult, or when I became an adult at 18, I joined the military. I never stayed too long in one duty assignment, right? So, and not only that, but while I was at that duty assignment, a lot of times I'm always gone. You know what I mean? If I'm there for 4 years, you got to remember, I probably deployed. I probably went to some school. I probably went onto the field for 30 days, and we're training. So you don't really get kind of closed into your space, because one thing about the military is that every day it looks different. Every day the office looks different in the military. That's one thing I can say. Every day you don't have to worry about mundane, because every day days look different. So when you are having born days, those are the days that you are appreciative, because that means you ain't deployed, like for real. Now, aside from that, to bring my thought in, aside from that, so what was I even talking about? So when I talk about living on autopilot, right? Do you think about that? Do you think about, okay, this is something I do every day, this is something I do sometimes, or how do you do it, right? You have to, because you have to be able to say, you know what, I can't do this every day. And my point that I was making was this: when I was in the military, and I know my brain, that's ADHD, when I was in the military, I recognized that I didn't stay a long time at certain places. So because I didn't stay a long time at certain places, I never got like tired of my surroundings, and even in my home, right? When I was home at my house, like, I was just appreciative to be there with my kids. So I didn't get tired of the decorations or anything. So, but now that I'm retired, now that I'm home every day and I work from home, I find myself redecorating my house more, because I recognize that part of me is that I have to see different things. If I don't see different things in my surroundings often, it becomes mundane to me. It becomes like cabin fever for me. And so, what I've learned to do is either through for a season. So, like, for example, when it becomes fall or when it becomes spring, I literally decorate my house to accommodate those colors. Or when it's a holiday, a major holiday like Thanksgiving or Christmas, I'll make sure I bring in Christmas decorations and Thanksgiving decorations. And then sometimes I'll even do Halloween, just depends, right? And so these things allow me decorating for the seasons, allow me to change my surroundings often, right? Like even with my office, this stuff was on this wall at one point, right? So the more and more I come to my office, I have to change it up, because it has to look different, because I can't look at the same thing too long. And I know this about myself. Okay. This is something I know this about myself. So when we're doing things and it becomes repetitive and we're just doing it, check yourself and look at where your life at. You're on autopilot, and look at what small changes you can do to make that where it doesn't feel like just another Groundhog Day, right? Because once we start living that mundane life where we're starting to just be, I call it complacency, then we're not elevating. We're like this, you know. Another thing that I do for myself sometimes is I even challenge myself and say, okay, for a whole week, I'm not going to eat starches, or for a whole month, or for 2 weeks, I'm going to juice fast, or it's just a way of me improving myself, right? Because no matter what I do, when I do those things, I already know it's good for the body. So if it's good for the body, it's good for the mind. And it's good for things because it keeps me pushing forward. Like I'm not always just day to day. It's always something for me to shoot for, something for me to do, something for me to say, okay, here's a goal and I'm going to shoot for it, right? And so anyway, that's what your homework prompt is for this week. And then for your bonus reflection, What did survival teach you that success is trying to unteach you? And again, this goes back to that you don't have to hustle hard in order to be successful. You don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs to get to where you're trying to go. So when we think about things like that, what is survival teaching you that success is trying to unteach you? And that's another one of your bonus reflections. And then of course, you have your emotions and feelings for this week. This is where you get to freely talk about anything that came up doing this thought process, doing this week, doing this lesson, something that you could say, you know what, I might need to sit with this a little bit more, right? I need to, and if you have to go back to week one and look at that and maybe change some things in there, then by all means do so. Because one thing about self-actualizing or growing is that it's always it's a process, right? It's a process. The person that you were when you were younger are not going to be the same person you are today. Like for me, I'm 52. When I was 42, I'm not the same person. Same thing with 32 and 22. Because things that I tolerated or things that I did in my 20s when I was 22, I would never do at 52. I would never do at 52. But at that time, I didn't see anything differently. I didn't know anything differently. So what I thought was normal was normal. So you're not committed to stand the way that people see you. So don't feel like you have to stay in that way because if I break free, no, 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 no. You are not defined by anything you did back then. And you need to know that. Okay. Because a lot of times people will get caught up in this autopilot living because they feel like they don't deserve more because of maybe something they did in the past, or maybe because people are trying to keep them somewhere that they've been. That's not what self-actualization is. You will never get to your best life with that mentality. You will never get to your best life allowing someone else to dictate to you how you live your life, right? You are not that person you were yesterday. At least you shouldn't be. Every day you should learn, you should try to be a little bit better than you were the day before. Okay. So this is what week 2 is. Okay. And so again, like I said in the other video, because I don't know if it transpired over, so I will say it again. If you are an HTU student and you're watching this, be sure to comment below and reply to somebody else's comment as well for your credit for this week. And if there's something that you want to talk about and it's not in, you don't want to put it on a chat, or something you want to ask that came up during this particular process or these lessons, by all means, shoot me an email. Those of you who are enrolled in HTU, you do have my email address. I've sent plenty of emails. I send them every week. For everyone else who are stopping in, or if this should drop it, you want a self-actualization coach or a coach, I will put my Acuity link at the bottom of this description. And that way you can book a 15-minute consultation with me and see if I am the coach for you. And if you have just stopped by and came across this video, let me know what you think and leave a comment in the description. And I will talk to you guys in week 3, lesson 3. Bye.